is sponsored by Motion VFX. Over the last few months, I've been shooting with a lot of anamorphic lenses, mostly because anamorphic provides a unique and creative look that makes it stand out from all the clinically sharp lenses out there. But shooting with anamorphic lenses presents a number of difficulties that, as a solo run-and-gun shooter like myself, are hard to remedy. So I spent the last few weeks tinkering in the workshop here to come up with the ultimate run-and-gun anamorphic rig. Let's get into it. So when designing this rig, I wanted to come up with a solution for a few of the key difficulties that come with shooting anamorphic. First, anamorphic and basically all cine lenses are manual focus, so we've got to come up with a focusing solution. Secondly, accurately monitoring anamorphic footage requires D-squeeze, so we need a good monitor to handle this for us as well. And whew, we got a good one for you. And lastly, given that I'm a solo shooter who's often traveling around a ton, I want to be able to quickly and easily travel with this entire rig. It's got to be a tool-free breakdown that's relatively light and can easily fit into any standard camera bag. For the rest of this video, I want to show you how I've solved for each of these problems so that you can do the same. And like always, everything I talk about will be linked in the description. For the core of the rig, I'm using the Sony FX3. The cage I'm using nowadays is the new small rig Hawklock cage. This one provides a few minor improvements compared to the original, but for our purposes, the key is the new modular NATO rail on the top, which gives you access to the hot shoe mount on the FX3 in addition to having a NATO rail. That'll be important later, so if you already have a prior version of the FX3 cage, I'll link to a different NATO rail option that you can use instead. For my lenses, I've mostly been using the Blazar Remus 1.5x A set, but I've also used Surays, Viltrox, and the Blazar Katos a lot lately as well. If you want a full anamorphic lens breakdown, check out this video after you're done watching this one. My PL mount adapter is the Nisi Athena adapter. I don't have a whole lot to say about this other than it's good, it works. And then I'm using the Polar Pro Maglock V&Ds for my filters since I really love the versatility that they provide for this run-and-gun style of shooting. For focusing, I've gone for the all-out approach. So rather than a manual follow focus or going by hand, I'm using the DJI Focus Pro. If you aren't familiar with the Focus Pro, it uses LiDAR sensor to determine the distance to a subject and then transmits that data to the focus motor and automatically turns the focus ring. This thing is honestly stupidly awesome, and it works so much better than I would have expected to help pull off shots that normally would take a seasoned secondary focus puller to achieve. I really like to use the AMF mode, which allows you to highlight a subject and then lock into it with autofocus using the screen and the trigger on the handle. So say I'm tracking Britta, we're walking through a forest and I know that she's gonna walk in between a tree. Because it's a LiDAR, it's just trying to bounce a laser off of whatever it sees first. So if something goes in between, it's gonna lose it. With that AMF mode, you can kind of just apply a little bit of pressure on the wheel. And if you feel it start to pull against you, and you know it shouldn't be, you can just apply a little pressure on there. And then as soon as you walk out from the tree, let go and it'll snap back. And then of course if you need to, you could just go to full manual focus and do it all yourself. If you're someone like me who films themselves a lot, another awesome thing is that you can just set it up for autofocus, and then once you walk into the frame, it'll recognize you as the subject and starts tracking you as you move around. You can also store the calibration of a bunch of different lenses in the system as well. Most of the popular lenses are already pre-programmed, so all you need to do is go into the app and say which lens you're using, and it'll do all the calibration for you, and then you can save that as a profile for use later, so no need to use the app after you've done it once. However, as you switch on and off the Focus Pro, or if you change lenses, you'll have to recalibrate on the handle. There are a few quirks that you might want to be aware of. First, the battery life isn't particularly great. They claim it's rated for 12 hours, but honestly for me, sometimes it's closer to like 4 on a heavy day of shooting, so you are probably going to want a second battery. The Focus Pro is also not a fancy XD linear motor that we'd get in like a Sony lens. It makes some noise, partially just from like the gears going up against each other and spinning. So just know that the sound of the focusing can be picked up from an on-camera microphone. If you're like me and you're using Remus lenses or any of the other many cheaper anamorphic lenses that have focus breathing, know that sometimes those micro movements of autofocus can sometimes create some kind of focus breathing wiggles as well. There's also a lot going on with the Focus Pro. You've got all your cables and pieces, So how do we make sure that this is a tool-free setup? Well, I basically have the Focus Pro's rod clamp attached to the side of the FX3 cage at all times. Like it just lives there on the left side. This allows us to attach both the focus motor and the handle to that side of the camera without the use of any tools because it just has a locking mechanism built in. But then we have the LiDAR sensor. By default, this comes with a cold shoe mount adapter. However, we're gonna need that cold shoe mount later, so we can't go that route. Well, if you disassemble that cold shoe, you're left with the arm and just an empty 1/4-20 screw. I've then replaced that cold shoe with a Condor Blue mini quick release. We can take the male end of that and attach it to the LiDAR, and then the female end, and we bolt that onto our NATO rail. Now it just slides in and locks into place, and there's also anti-twist screws on both sides of this thing, so it's completely locked in and it won't twist all over the place, which is actually crucial for making sure that your LiDAR is correctly calibrated. And you'll notice that we still have access to our cold shoe on the FX3, which brings me to our next point, the monitor. But before I talk about my absolutely favorite monitor that I've ever used, you might have noticed some sweet motion graphics going on within this video. Well, those come from Motion VFX, which is the sponsor of today's video. Motion VFX is a super easy way to achieve high-end customizable motion graphics without needing After Effects or Fusion or things like that. My personal favorites are the M callouts plugins, which allow you to quickly create trackable callout text and then customize it to your own style. Like I can hold up my phone and then track it with a callout point super easily in Resolve. But they also have a ton of other cool stuff like LUTs and titles and stock elements, and they have options for Final Cut, Premiere, Resolve, After Effects. It's sick. So go to motionvfx.com to check it out, and I'll leave a link in the description as well. By the way, this little graphic, it's from Motion VFX. Pretty sweet. Now, I'm sure I'm gonna ruffle some feathers with this one, but the monitor that I'm using is probably not what you'd expect. It's my iPhone. With my iPhone, I'm using the Monitor Plus app, which is also available for Android if you're part of the Green Bubble Gang. The app is free, but the paid version is just a one-time $18.99 purchase, which unlocks all the goodies like focus peaking, zebras, LUT monitoring, D-squeeze, and autofocus if you're ever using an autofocus lens. I know people are always annoyed paying for apps, but this thing is honestly so worth it, especially considering the price of like any other monitor, and those don't even have like half of the functionality that this thing does. Like you literally have full control of the camera through this app. Start and stop record, changing your exposure settings, white balance, and the same level of autofocus that you'd get if you're using the main screen on your camera. It is super easy to customize all the settings as well, since the UI is actually what you'd expect from like a proper iPhone app rather than some janky UI that some monitors have. Another benefit of doing D-squeeze on the phone monitor is you can leave your camera in normal aspect ratio. This allows you to keep the standard image stabilization enabled, which I've found to be my preference for taking out micro jitters, since you can't normally have image stabilization on if you're de-squeezing in camera. Note, you do want to turn off active image stabilization, otherwise you do get some wobbling on the corners. There's obviously loads of phone mounts out there, but I'm using the Polar Pro Light Chaser for my iPhone 15 Pro Max. That way I can just keep this case on my phone like at all times, and then the Light Chaser system comes with a quick release grip that I've attached to a cold shoe mount. So now that little grip and the cold shoe mount can just easily get tossed into the bag, or then it slides onto the hot shoe mount of the FX3 right behind the Focus Pro. Hence why we needed to keep that available, because otherwise it's really hard to get the Focus Pro with an external monitor. To connect the phone, you just use a USB-C cable into the FX3. I'm using this little Condor Blue right angle cable to keep it nice and tucked away. And like, look how much more light and compact this is compared to using like a big third-party monitor that's also going to need a separate battery. So you're probably going to end up having a V-mount, and then you have to do like, you know, the V-mount plate, and then this goes on the thing, and then you're lugging this around everywhere. It's a mess. It's a pain. We're not doing that. Now I know the biggest question that I'll probably get about this phone setup is battery life. Can my camera charge the phone battery? Or how fast does my phone battery die? Sadly, your camera cannot charge the phone. Actually, it oddly does the opposite. When you plug your phone into your camera, it's gonna think that you have an external power source connected via USB-C, and it'll start drawing power from the phone. So be sure to go into Setup, USB, USB power supply off, and then you can disable that. That said, I am surprised how long the battery lasts. Like, I've actually run out of battery on the Focus Pro far more than my phone. As I mentioned, nothing on this rig requires tools once you've done the initial setup. Like, the full rig itself isn't really all that large, but I think the best part is how little room it takes up in a bag. With this setup, everything fits into the Nomadic Peter McKinnon accessory case. So we just have camera, case, phone goes in your pocket. You can literally put this into any bag and you're cooking up some tasty, cinematic, anamorphic, focused goodness in no time. So what do you think of this rig? What did I miss? Or what would you change? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.